Chapter 26. Property Damage no Jutsu. In the depths of the Forest of Death, moonlight filtered through shredded leaves, scattering like silver dust across the ground. Two figures collided in the messy clearing, separated, and collided again. Each contact erupted with visible airwaves. Ryo slowly raised his head, gripping the sharp long blade in his hand. His body slightly heaved, his intense aura yet to calm. In his mind, Shanks' legacy unlocked to 60%. Shanks' legacy fusion, 50.3%. Detected host fighting under extreme high pressure. Shanks' legacy fusion increased by 0.2%. Shanks' legacy fusion increased to 50.6%. Strength evaluation. Elite Jonin. After 2 years of Ryo's desperate efforts and Tsunade's beatings, his strength had broken through to the Elite Jonin stage. Not far in front of him, Tsunade's hands hung by her sides, knuckles white from clenching. Sweat traced shining paths down her cheeks and neck, revealing, along with her slightly hurried breathing, the true marks left by the battle. She looked at the young man before her, at the ugly forest scar carved out by his long blade, her heart filled with a churning sense of absurdity. The shocking mess before her clearly showed the young man's growth over the past 2 years. From the very beginning, when this kid was sent flying by her punch, crashing into a tree trunk and unable to get up, to today, this landscape of messy wooden stakes, as if dozens of a rank futon, Kazakiri no Jutsu, wind release, wind cutter technique, had been unleashed. The kid who could barely take a casual punch from her 2 years ago, now his sword's reach could force her, an elite Jonin, to retreat repeatedly. Tsunade vigorously shook her head, dispelling the lingering dizziness. Her throat was dry, and her voice was a little hoarse. Let me catch my breath. You little monster. Soon, she took a step closer, her toes grinding into the damp soil, knuckles cracking. An invisible pressure instantly spread. Again. As her words fell, the air tore. Chila. Responding to her was a dazzling, crimson arc of light, condensed as if solid, tearing through the air close to the ground without warning, aiming straight for Tsunade's legs. Its speed was so fast that it only left a burning trail on the retina, arriving in an instant. The surrounding flying wood chips were caught by the strong wind, suddenly pulling out fine, hissing straight lines. TCH. Tsunade let out a short, dissatisfied sound from her nostrils, her eyes suddenly sharp. Her forward momentum was forcefully interrupted. Chakra instantly erupted violently from her feet, and she, like a top struck hard, violently twisted her waist on the spot, performing an extreme dodge. Boom. The crimson arc of light brushed past her rolled UP clothes, fiercely crashing into the dense forest barrier of ancient trees behind her. Dull, thunderous shattering sounds exploded in a series. There was no stalemate, no resistance. Trees as thick as bowls were neatly severed the moment they were touched, the sound of wood fibers bursting like the wails of dying beasts. Dozens of giant trees simultaneously let out an ear-piercing groan, their canopies tilting, interlocking as they fell, crashing, raising a sky full of murky dust and a wild storm of branches and leaves. Tsunade didn't even have time to change her surprised expression before her vision was obscured by the overwhelming, rolling dust. Too slow. A sharp shout, however, ghost-like, closed in within an inch behind her. The young man's clear voice, filled with boiling battle intent, came coldly from behind her neck. Too fast, there was no time to think. A chilling sensation ran up Tsunade's spine. That was the battle instinct honed through countless near-death experiences. Her entire body's muscles instantly tensed like iron. Without thinking, the surging chakra within her body suddenly reversed, like an erupting tsunami, forcefully pouring into her feet. Chakra violently erupted. The ground violently caved in, mud and gravel shooting into the sky. Using this brute force recoil, her body, instead of advancing, retreated, turning into a blurry afterimage against common sense, using the weight and momentum of her entire body to savagely crash towards the source of the sound behind her. Using her back as a weapon, she bravely counterattacked. Bang! A dull, heart-stopping collision sound exploded. Ryo's backhand strike with the flat of his blade, seemingly carrying 1,000 caddies of force, landed squarely on Tsunade's hard, chakra-reinforced back. A visible ring of airwaves violently burst from the two of them as the core, fiercely tearing through the sky full of dust that had not yet settled. Power violently clashed in an instant, forming a brief stalemate. In this struggle lasting less than 1,000th of a second. Buzz. A second crimson slash had silently condensed and detached from Ryo's blade. Its angle was as cunning as a venomous snake's bite, piercing through the chaotic, swirling air between them. It was no longer a massive arc of light, but condensed into a finer, even faster and more terrifying, sharp arrow, rapidly spinning out close to Ryo's own blade. Its target was Tsunade's completely exposed and undefended waist and abdomen, revealed by her counterattack. Time seemed to stretch infinitely in the solidified collision. Even the wood chips and dust floating in the air paused for a moment. Tsunade's nerves were suddenly tightened by this insidious change in technique. There was no time to think. Her battle instincts, honed through countless trials, forcibly took over her body. She forcefully twisted her center of gravity mid-counter-attack, chakra brutally pouring into her left arm. The arm instantly became unnaturally twisted and swollen. All subsequent moves, all techniques, were forced to be completely abandoned by this vicious, insidious, and unannounced attack. She could only take it head-on. The thick arm, wrapped in visibly dense chakra, carrying the domineering momentum of crushing rocks and mountains, hastily yet resolutely slammed towards the fatal crimson arrow-like trajectory in front of her waist and abdomen. Boom. The moment the arm met the slash, it wasn't a simple blocking sound, but a violent clash of airflow and a chakra energy detonation. Dazzling light briefly swallowed the outlines of the two figures. The sharp sound of metal cutting mixed with the explosion of energy, stinging the eardrums. The condensed crimson slash, like an invisible beast crashing into a thick steel barrier, suddenly shattered and exploded. It transformed into countless tiny, swirling red streams of light, scattering in all directions, cutting thousands of crisscrossing deep marks into the ground. Tsunade let out a muffled groan. The powerful impact made her lose her footing, and she stumbled back 2 steps sideways before barely steadying herself. A large section of her left arm sleeve was torn away by the violent energy. Several thin lines of blood were cut into the outside of her forearm by the residual sword intent, and a subtle burning sensation spread. She lowered her head to glance at the blood marks on her arm, then looked up at the figure standing as steady as a rock opposite her. Her gaze was as complex as if she were looking at a monster in human skin. Hey! Ryo casually rested his blade on his shoulder, slightly raising his chin. Beads of sweat dripped along his slightly youthful jaw, but his eyes were astonishingly bright, and the corner of his mouth unconsciously curved into a youthful, spirited smile. Still standing. Pretty tough, aren't you, you crazy old hag? The provocation in his eyes was so direct it was almost arrogant, burning like fire. You. Tsunade shook her stinging arm, suppressing the surging emotions in her heart. The usual ferocity returned to her face, her voice rough from the battle. Got your wings, huh? Think you can fly just because you can cut one? Forgot how I used to beat you senseless. She stomped her foot violently, her body shooting forward like an exploding cannonball. The ground cracked inch by inch beneath her feet. No more probing, no more holding back. Chakra, like boiling lava, wildly coiled, compressed around her clenched fist, forming a heart-stopping, almost solid milky white aura. The air in front of that fist was brutally squeezed, letting out an unbearable shriek. Just the stance of accumulating power and rushing forward, the wild and unparalleled oppressive force, like a tangible heavy mountain, slammed towards Ryo. Ha! Ryo let out a sharp laugh, advancing instead of retreating. The blade brought forth a dazzling waterfall of cold light, slashing straight down. It wasn't a subtle technical confrontation in swordsmanship, but the most primitive and violent direct clash between pure power and sharp edge. To be continued. 0 comments 0 vote. Chapter 27. Attempted Murder Bonus. Bonus for 600 PS. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. Clang. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The blade collided with the fist wrapped in thick chakra, and the sharp sound rang out like clashing steel. A dull hum followed, carrying a violent shockwave. A visible ring of force expanded outward once again. The soil beneath their feet instantly sank and turned into powder. Ryo's slash was like striking a solid wall. After a brief pause, a huge recoil surged back fiercely along the blade and into his arm. Dang dang dang. Ryo felt his chest churn with blood and his palms go numb. He was forced back 3 steps by that unstoppable force before barely steadying himself. Each step left a deep footprint in the wet mud. Ha! Tsunade sneered smugly, not pausing for even a heartbeat. Her body spun into a high-speed blur, fists hammering like a storm of giant steel hammers. Each strike, wrapped in violent chakra, smashed forward with force that could split mountains and crack stone. The fists blurred together, shadows merging into one, the violent wind pressure sending leaves and wood chips flying into a brutal force field that rained down toward Ryo. Come on. There wasn't a trace of retreat in Ryo's eyes. Instead, a ferocious light flared. His muscles tensed, blue veins bulging under his skin. The long blade in his hand became an extension of his body, moving and parrying within the narrow space with incredible fluidity. The heavy weapon felt as light as a feather. Sometimes it stabbed into the tiniest gaps in Tsunade's barrage like a snake flicking its tongue. Other times it diverted power like a sail catching the wind, redirecting momentum aside. The sword light flowed down like mercury, forming a cold, shimmering barrier. Clang, clang, clang. The collisions rang out densely, enough to make one's teeth ache. Every strike against Tsunade's chakra-coated fist sent dazzling sparks flying. Inside the storm of fists, Ryo looked like a small boat tossed in giant waves, rocking and blocking, but somehow still afloat. His footwork was unnervingly efficient and precise, every step landing at an odd angle that let him stay upright at the edge of the vortex. Then, a sharp, bowl-sized piece of wood was whipped into the air by the violent currents. Caught by the aftershock of Tsunade's punch, it spun like a crossbow bolt and shot silently toward the exposed gap behind Ryo's right shoulder. Puff! The wooden shard pierced into the outside of his shoulder. Blood spread instantly across his rough shirt, the stain dark and expanding. Ryo's body only gave a slight tremor. His expression didn't even flicker. The sword light in his hand didn't falter. Taking advantage of the imbalance caused by the impact, he twisted his waist, the strain on the wound shifting his weight just enough. A condensed blood-red sword aura snapped out like a venomous snake, silent yet lightning fast. It cut under the arc of Tsunade's heavy right fist as it finished its swing. Tisk! Tsunade's pupils shrank. Forced to pause, she felt a chill and a sharp sting along her forearm. New blood mixed with old, staining her arm almost completely red. She glanced at Ryo's bleeding shoulder, at how unaffected he seemed, and the absurdity in her chest surged again. Damn it, what kind of body is this? Anyone else stabbed like that would be howling and dropping their weapon. But this brat didn't even twitch, as if neither the wood nor the blood belonged to him. The relentless attacks and flawless defense were draining Ryo's stamina fast. Sweat streamed from his clenched jaw, dripping into the mud beneath his feet. Each breath seared his lungs. His muscles grew sore and stiff after endless rapid pivots and bursts of strength, like fine lead sand was filling his joints. Not good enough. Tsunade caught the faint urgency in his breathing, the split-second delay in his movements. She inhaled deeply, chakra in her body surging like a flood. Her presence spiked sharply. The milky white chakra wrapping her fists turned blinding, like two burning miniature suns. The explosive roar of her punches became so sharp it stabbed the eardrums. Boom, boom, boom. 3 consecutive detonations like war drums shook the clearing. Each clash with Ryo's blade sent out shockwaves and showers of sparks. But his steps were growing heavier. Each retreat carried him back farther than the last. The veins on his sword arm bulged as if resisting a battering ram. The 4th punch came, heavier still. The blade finally groaned under the pressure. Ryo's body lost its balance, blasted away like a stone from a catapult. Boom! An ancient tree, thick enough for 3 people to encircle, took the impact. Its bark burst apart, spiderweb cracks spreading across the trunk. Ryo slammed hard against it, then slid down to the ground. Dust filled the air. He dropped to one knee, clutching his chest with his left hand, gasping for breath. Sweat dripped like rain, mixing with blood from his shoulder, pooling dark in the mud. Strength poured out of him like floodwater. That last blow had nearly wrung the last of his reserves dry. His sword stuck deep in the dirt beside him, the handle trembling and humming. Tsunade stood firm, the light fading from her fists. She was panting, sweat beading her temples, but her aura didn't waver. Her sharp gaze pinned the boy, rough voice biting through the heavy air. HMPH. Tough brat. But you think this little bit of strength is enough to topple a veteran? She flexed her bloodied wrist and strode closer. For all your stamina, it's still not enough. You need more training. Ryo lifted his head. No surrender burned in his eyes, only fire. He planted a hand on the ground, pushing himself to stand. But his legs felt filled with molten lead, twitching painfully. A sudden burn shot through his muscles. He stumbled, one knee nearly giving way. His breath came faster, vision blurred by sweat. Tsunade's shadow loomed over him. Watching his stubborn refusal to give in, even at his limit, something flickered across her gaze, complex and fleeting. 2 years. From a boy who couldn't even take a punch, to someone who forced her into this state. She crouched, her broad hand slapping his sweaty shoulder, avoiding the bleeding wound. His skin burned with heat, muscles taut with stubborn vitality. You little brat. Her voice was still rough and commanding, but there was something unspoken beneath it. What a monster. She exhaled heavily, her breath brushing his damp forehead. Even I have to admit, you beat me down hard today. Tisk. Unbelievable. At my age, losing ground to a kid. Wiping sweat from her face, she threw it aside. People call me a genius. Her lips twisted into a self-mocking smile, eyes clouding like she was staring back into the Senju training grounds of the past. Genius. At 11, I was just promoted to Chunin, still struggling not to end up looking like a pincushion from a Fusenbon. Her eyes snapped back to Ryo, streaked with sweat and dirt yet unyielding. But you're a monster. At your age, with this strength, even my grandfather, Senju Hashirama, the so-called god of shinobi, wasn't necessarily stronger. The words tumbled out raw, then she abruptly waved them away, dismissing her own sentiment. Her expression darkened, like storm clouds blotting out the sunset. Those geezers in Konoha. Tsunade's tone turned sharp, her irritation unmasked. Straightening, her brows knitted tight. The order came down. I'm to deploy to the land of rain immediately. Her eyes cut past the forest of death's canopy, toward the northwest, where war clouds gathered. The war has begun. Ryo said nothing. To be continued. Chapter 28. Zero Dignity. At the edge of the forest, Tsunade leaned against a relatively intact tree. After catching her breath, she started moving again. Hiss, Tsunade let out a low groan, enduring the soreness in her body, her hands glowing with soft green chakra. Instead of healing herself first, she pressed her hand directly on Ryo's shoulder wound, where half a wooden splinter was still lodged. Don't move. Her voice was sharp and commanding. Ryo's body tensed instinctively, but he didn't resist. He felt the immense life force in Tsunade's chakra, precisely enveloping the wound, expelling the splinter, and accelerating the regeneration of muscle tissue. Her technique sped up recovery far beyond his natural healing. Freak, Tsunade muttered under her breath while working. Her medical ninjutsu catalyzed cells, but what truly unsettled her was Ryo's own recovery ability. The way his flesh twitched and reformed, like countless tiny organisms rushing to repair under her guidance, the bleeding stopped, the wound closed, and new pink flesh grew, all in minutes. After fixing the worst of Ryo's shoulder injury, Tsunade turned her glowing hands on herself, treating the sword chi cuts across her body with practiced movements. She clicked her tongue, glancing at the light scratches left on Ryo's arm. Every time I see that ridiculous recovery of yours, it makes me feel like I'm the ordinary one here. Her tone carried equal parts awe and irritation. Ryo flexed his shoulder, now fully healed, and stayed silent. This was just the start, wasn't it? Compared to prodigies who piloted giant mecha at 8 and were toppling gods by 12, his so-called healing was nothing impressive, just enough to keep him alive a little longer. In other words, a glorified training dummy. Tsunade misread his silence, assuming he was worn out from the battle. She finished treating herself, stretched, and rolled her shoulders, almost fully recovered. Her gaze lingered on Ryo's youthful face. Then, forming a simple summoning seal, she slapped her palm down. Bang! White smoke puffed out. Not a slug this time, but a slender, ancient katana appeared in her hands. The scabbard was jet black, the tsuba intricately carved, and the air around it radiated sharpness. Tsunade looked at the sword like it was a hot coal in her hands. Here. She tossed it to Ryo with a tone that was half annoyed, half helpless. You little brat got lucky. Ryo's reflexes caught it cleanly. The weight was solid, the craftsmanship flawless. Drawing it halfway, the blade gleamed like autumn water, cold and lethal. A damn fine sword. I was planning to give it to you when you graduated, Tsunade said, pouting slightly. But since you won't make it to graduation, take it now. I've burned a massive favor with that stinky snake for this. Her voice dripped venom at the words. It's forged from the same material as the legendary Kusanagi sword. Sharp, durable, should suit your unique brand of swordsmanship. She almost said, butchery, but stopped herself. Kusanagi sword. Orochimaru's. Sasuke's. Ryo's grip tightened. That name carried too much weight. Why would Orochimaru hand something like this over? How big of a debt did Tsunade owe? Or was this just one of his schemes? Appreciate it, sensei. Ryo gave a short reply. A weapon like this wasn't something you turned down. Years of cooking for her finally paid off. This was better than a lifetime of thanks. Tsunade, however, froze like she'd been jabbed. She waved her hands quickly. No. Don't call me sensei. I haven't taught you a damn thing. That title's just for show. Her lip curled. And don't forget, you're still on probation. Officially, you failed my test. Ryo just looked at her. No words, just a stare that screamed, This woman's crazy. One moment she handed him a blade worth nations, the next she was cutting ties. It just sounds wrong, okay. I prefer when you call me by name. It's easier on the ears. Tsunade said, still looking unsettled. And with how fast you're progressing, her eyes narrowed at him warily. What happens if, in a couple of years, I can't even beat you? What kind of sensei loses to her student? Where's the dignity in that? She poked her own cheek with a scowl. So no. Publicly, we're teacher and student. Privately, we're friends. Got it? Sure. Ryo's tone was flat. Whatever she wanted to call it. The sword was real, and that's what mattered. Tsunade visibly relaxed when he didn't argue further, but her expression soon darkened again. The looming war in aim pressed down like a stone on her chest. Nawaki's face flashed in her memory, youthful and passionate. By the way, Ryo. Her tone hardened, probing. The war's begun. Do you want to go to the front? With your strength, you're already at elite Jonin level. What you lack is the fire of the battlefield. Blood and fire are the fastest shortcuts to growth. No. Ryo cut her off without hesitation. I'm not graduating early. Just that. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Reluctant to leave the academy. Want to spend more time with Kushina. A trace of nostalgia and envy flashed in her eyes. Tisk. You too, I'm jealous. To be continued. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 29. The merciful plan. Break his legs bonus. Ryo didn't respond to Tsunade's subtle teasing. Instead, he changed the subject. By the way, Tsunade. Nawaki, he's going to the front too. The image of Nawaki's death from the original story flashed through his mind. Yes. Tsunade's voice sank, heavy with exhaustion. It's his choice, and his destiny. Her tone carried helplessness, but also an undeniable sense of duty. As the grandson of the first and second Hokage, he must inherit the will of fire and protect Konoha. Orochimaru will take him. The last sentence sounded more like self-comfort, clinging to the reliability of her teammate. Ryo let out a scoff, dripping with sarcasm. So the battlefields rotted to the point where fresh genin have to go die. That's the will of fire. He locked eyes with Tsunade, her face hardening instantly, and pressed further. I read the records in the Konoha library. What was the first Hokage's greatest ideal when founding Konoha? Wasn't it to build a peaceful era where kids didn't have to go to war? He leaned forward slightly, each word sharp and deliberate. So now Konoha's will of fire is to throw kids onto the battlefield like kindling. The silence that followed stretched long. Only the rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of surviving birds filled the air. The struggle in Tsunade's expression was plain to see. She was Konoha's princess, the battlefield's medical saint, but right now, she was just a sister terrified for her brother's life. Maybe you're right. At last, Tsunade's voice came, utterly drained. What kind of will of fire? It was all empty nonsense. She only had one brother. Had the Senju clan not bled enough for Konoha? Nawaki was an average genin. On the vast battlefield, he was a drop in the ocean, without any real weight. The thought of his foolish, impulsive, hot-headed face twisted her chest painfully. Going to war meant a onaintan chance of survival. No, more like none at all. Even her formidable uncle, Tobarama, had fallen in battle. But what worried her most was Nawaki's own mindset. That kid worshipped the will of fire to the point of obsession. If she tried to stop him, he'd sneak off anyway. And if he did that, he wouldn't even know how he died. Nawaki, what am I supposed to do with you? Who? Tsunade let out a long breath, like expelling her frustration. Finally, she looked at Ryo, her voice carrying an uncharacteristic plea. That kid, he doesn't understand danger. He won't listen to me. His head is stuffed with great-grandpa's will, and protecting the village. If I stop him, he'll just sneak to the front lines. That's no different from throwing himself into a fire pit. Ryo listened quietly, nodding expressionlessly. He didn't particularly care about Nawaki. But he was Tsunade's younger brother, and for the past 2 years, they had shared meals from the same pot. Though, more accurately, freeloading off him and Kushina. More importantly, he didn't want Kushina brokenhearted. And he didn't feel like watching Tsunade fall apart over her brother's corpse. Got it. Ryo's tone was flat, casual, like discussing dinner. Not hard. Set it up in the next couple days. I'll run some practical training with him. Tsunade blinked. Quote. I'll, accidentally, break his leg. He met her eyes calmly. And every time he starts recovering, I'll, accidentally, break it again. He'll stay in bed until either good news comes back from the front or he grows up enough to face reality. The words were calm, but the content made Tsunade shiver. It was a method both brutal and brilliant. Simple, effective, and easy to pass off as a training mishap. That's my brother, Tsunade finally said, voice trembling, my blood brother. I know. Ryo's eyelids didn't even twitch. His tone was steady, almost bored. So what do you want? Cry over what's left of him on a battlefield. Or deal with him whining in a hospital bed while he heals. At least then he'll still be alive, able to marry, have kids, and let you spoil some nephews. For once, he spoke at length. His reasoning was straightforward, he just didn't want Kushina grieving, and it balanced out Tsunade's years of sparring and today's gift. Otherwise, why would he bother? Tsunade was left speechless. Ryo's words were cold, but the logic stabbed straight through her excuses. The images clashed in her mind, holding Nawaki's corpse versus holding his hand as he grimaced in pain, alive. Death forever, or temporary pain with future hope. Was there even a choice? Her face shifted through emotions before she finally let out a sigh, raking her fingers through her golden hair. Alright, I get it. So damn annoying. She strode ahead, waving her hand like she was shooing him. But go easy. And remember, it's an accident. Her voice carried reluctant acquiescence, even as her mind raced on how to handle her brother and how to explain Nawaki's serious injury to Orochimaru. Ryo didn't answer. He pulled the sword from the ground, slung it over his shoulder, and tucked the newly acquired Kusanagi blade at his waist. Without a word, he followed Tsunade out of the Death Forest, a place that now looked like it had been ravaged by nature itself. To be continued. Chapter 30. Rasengan or Bust. The night was thick, seeping into the edges of Konoha. Ryo flicked the mud from his Kusanagi scabbard and stepped into his small, simple dwelling. A tingling sensation lingered on his left shoulder from Tsunade's rough treatment, but deeper still was a burning exhaustion spreading from within his body. Every muscle screamed. Every bone groaned. His whole body reminded him of the insane life and death battle with Tsunade in the Forest of Death only hours earlier. Did he win? No. Strictly speaking, he'd been beaten into submission. But forcing Tsunade to that extent, making her bleed and stumble, that was enough. His next goal was to beat her so badly she couldn't get out of bed. How practical that was remained to be seen, since Tsunade was a medical ninja, but that didn't stop him from wanting to try. Ryo wiped his face, sweat and dirt clumping in his palm. He didn't light a lamp. Moonlight spilled faintly through the window, just enough to outline his cross-legged figure. Time for a debrief. His mind spun like a precision machine, replaying the battle frame by frame. Integration, 50.6%, he calculated. Elite Jonin-level combat power. Barely qualified. But the number didn't move. It was stuck. His body was holding him back. Armament hockey was powerful, but it demanded extreme physical strength. Ryo looked at his 11-year-old body. His heart beat steady, muscles bulged, blood rushed like ocean waves. Among his peers, his physique was monstrous. But still immature. It couldn't fully support armament hockey. Muscle fiber density, bone durability, blood vessel tolerance, these needed years to temper. Right now, it was like strapping bicycle wheels to a sports car. Press the accelerator all you want, it won't move. Frustrating. And worse, Ryo understood the essence of hockey, unwavering conviction. Yet his progress hit a wall for another reason entirely. His body wasn't just immature, it was bottlenecked. The system's integration rate couldn't climb without real life and death pressure. Shadow clone drills and sparring weren't enough anymore. His instincts sharpened, his techniques refined, but without the visceral edge of true killing intent pressing down, his growth slowed to a crawl. He wasn't afraid of danger, he just refused to throw himself into suicidal battles before he had the capital to survive them. So his strength crawled forward only through natural development, muscle memory, and swordsmanship refinement. Painfully slow. The irritation burned like a hot wire around his heart, tightening more and more. No. The scent of war had already seeped into Konoha like a cold mist. Standing still was suicide. Ryo forced down the frustration in the red-haired figure flickering in his mind. His gaze turned to the other source of power within him. Chakra. There, he had an overwhelming advantage. Chakra nature. He muttered. All 5 elements, basic use, nothing special. Common sense for a transmigrator. The real key was quantity. Ordinary ninja had chakra. Elites had a lot. Ryo's physical talent was so far beyond normal. On top of that, his transmigrator soul buffed his mental power. And somewhere in his bloodline lurked the spark of conqueror's hockey. Quantitative change into qualitative change. Wrong. He was skipping straight to a sea of chakra. As an adult, he would probably walk around with reserves on par with a tailed beast. A living chakra sea. And for the past 2 years, he had abused the ultimate cheat, shadow clone jutsu. Other shinobi risked their lives using it. Him, with his absurd physique in mind, he could tank the backlash of multiple clones at once. More clones, more progress. Basics. Control. Tree climbing. Water walking. Nature transformations. He had an army grinding for him. His chakra control wasn't supernatural, but it was close to microscopic precision. That ocean of chakra obeyed him like a tame-tailed beast. So, ninjutsu. That was where the cards lay. Flying Thunder God. God Tire. Sealing techniques. 6 paths level. Perfect trump cards. But all forbidden. Tsunade wasn't handing those over. If he could barely walk, why would she let him run? Fine. If he couldn't reach for the top tier, he'd forge his own path. His target. Rasengan. No hand seals. Instant activation. Unexpected. Deadly. Naruto spammed his way to Super Cage with nothing but Rasengan variations. Ryo knew the principle. Reverse engineering it was easy. His memory was a treasure trove. 2 years of research paid off. Chakra-shaped transformation, second nature. Nature transformation, early progress. Rasengan with elemental attributes was already within reach. For 2 years, he hadn't taught it to Kushina. Why? Because she was already overloaded. Academy during the day, Mito drilling sealing arts at night. She was pale from exhaustion. Ryo just wanted her to have some normal days before the world crushed her. But now, the horn of war had blown. Could he guarantee he wouldn't be drafted tomorrow? No. If he was gone, what about Kushina? Her level now. Taijutsu, average. Ninjutsu, aside from some Uzumaki sealing basics and a few drank water tricks, hopelessly weak. Not acceptable. She had to be armed. The plan crystallized. Step 1. Teach her Rasengan before graduation. A trump card for both offense and defense. Step 2. Once she became the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, teach her multiple shadow clone jutsu. With her Uzumaki bloodline's massive chakra and adamantine sealing chains, plus the shadow clone cheat, the results spoke for themselves. Naruto had pulled it off with less talent and only Asura's chakra cheat. Kushina's talent wasn't any worse. She just needed the right push. Then, perfect Jinchuriki. A complete 9 tails inside her. Infinite chakra. Super Kage-level combat power, guaranteed. Perfect Jinchuriki, massive chakra, shadow clone spam, Rasengan, safe and secure. Ryo made his decision. To be continued. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 31, Love is War bonus. The next morning, as usual, Ryo created a Kage Bunshin to attend class at the Ninja Academy. His real body went to the village's ninja tool shop to order the broken leg prop for Nawaki, something he had promised Tsunade yesterday. Class 5A of the Ninja Academy, during break. The cicadas chirped noisily outside, while the sun lazily streamed through the window. The classroom was filled with that sticky, restless atmosphere unique to the eve of graduation. Bang! Kushina's head slammed heavily against the open textbook, Geography of the Land of Fire, a study of fortifications, for the 3rd time. Ink marks twisted and swirled before her eyes. Once again, her peripheral vision swept toward the back corner by the window, uncontrollably. That figure in his worn-out old clothes, Ryo. His Kage Bunshin was sprawled out asleep. And who knew where his real body had gone? Kushina's cheeks puffed up unconsciously, her face flushed, and her heart pounded like a trapped rabbit. Irritation, annoyance, and a strange panic crawled up her spine like vines, tightening more and more. Graduation. Team assignments. Those 2 words fell into her heart like cold meteorites, leaving behind a deep, scorched crater. He was so strong. So strong that he could defeat a genin in seconds, so strong that even Tsunade had to give it her all to act as his sparring partner. After graduation, how could someone like him possibly stay in the village as an ordinary genin? And she. The secret weighing on her heart came from the occasional worried look in Grandma Mito's eyes. She was the new Nine Tails Jinchuriki. There was only one path for a Jinchuriki, confined inside the village, forced into silence as a cornerstone. The cage door was about to close. That. Every sighed. Hey, Kushina. A sudden elbow jabbed her. Kushina snapped out of her daze, realizing she had been staring at Ryo for far too long. She turned around and met Uchiha Makoto's sharp, pearl-like black eyes, which glimmered with amusement and understanding. Your soul's about to be sucked away by that sleeping redhead. Makoto leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper with a sly smile. You're practically drooling. Who's looking at that big idiot? Kushina's voice shot up as if her tail had been stepped on, drawing the attention of several students in the front row. She immediately shrank back, her face turning even redder. Lowering her head like an ostrich, she muttered in a voice as soft as a mosquito, I was just thinking about team assignments. Makoto didn't buy it. She followed Kushina's gaze exactly, glanced at Ryo's clone snoring in the corner, then turned back to look at Kushina's red ears. The knowing smile on her lips deepened. You're worried about Ryo. Worried that you won't be assigned to the same team, right? Makoto went straight to the point, tapping Kushina's desk with her finger. What if Ryo's team ends up with some pretty, cute, skilled girl who's exactly his type? Then they'll live and die together on missions, seeing each other every day. Ryo's so strong, who wouldn't admire him? Who wouldn't want to get close to him? And what if, just what if, that straight-faced blockhead develops a crack in his armor, and that girl takes the chance to swoop in? Boom. The scene Makoto painted exploded in Kushina's mind like a bomb. A vague but graceful figure, smiling sweetly, clinging to Ryo. Passing him water. Wiping his sweat. Even worse, tending to his wounds under the moonlight. No. Impossible. Kushina's hair bristled, her red hair standing on end. Like a lion defending its territory, she growled, Ryo is a complete straight man. All he ever thinks about is barbecuing and training. Nothing else. What vixen could ever flirt her way into that? No way. He won't even look twice. Her tone was firm, as much to counter Makoto as it was to convince herself. She knew Ryo best. After 2 years of living together, how much meat had she stolen from him? How many times had he yelled, get lost, you're too loud, or, don't bother me while I'm sleeping. Around him, there was nothing but trouble. And she was his biggest troublemaker. But deep down, a sharp thorn pricked at her inflated confidence. Did Ryo really like her? Protecting her, feeding her meat, indulging her, carrying her home, playing with her. Was it affection? Or was it just because she was a little troublemaker who needed looking after? Her certainty crumbled into unease. Her shoulders slumped, her bright blue eyes misting over like a young animal abandoned in the rain. She looked helplessly at Makoto, her best friend who always had ideas. A guilty thought flickered in her mind. What if I asked Tsunade to put Makoto on Ryo's team instead? Let Makoto watch him for me. Stop right there. Makoto seemed to read her thoughts and rolled her eyes. You want me to be your gatekeeper? Kushina. Naive. Passive. What if I can't watch him properly? What if I start watching him too much? That last sentence was barely audible, her eyes drifting for a moment. Makoto took a deep breath and leaned closer to Kushina's ear, her voice low but filled with determination. Kushina. Happiness isn't some fruit that falls from a tree. You have to climb up and pick it. If you're sure he's worth it, if you're this scared of losing him, then don't wait. Reserved. Forget that. Take the initiative. Make it a done deal, got it? Take the initiative. Those words struck Kushina like a spark, igniting the fog in her eyes into blazing flames. That's right. By the time that blockhead Ryo realizes, the chance might already be gone. If you wait for the rabbit, you might not catch it, and worse, someone else might take the nest. Who had Uzumaki Kushina ever been afraid of? Anyone who tried to take what was hers would face the wrath of the red-hot habanero. So what if it meant being more proactive? She clenched her fists. When she looked at Ryo again, there was no hesitation, only determination. Makoto was right. No illusions. Prepare to fight. Okay. Kushina's voice wasn't loud, but it rang with power. Her face was flushed with excitement and nerves, and flames seemed to dance in her light blue eyes. I'll do it. I'll take the initiative. Makoto, teach me. Makoto's eyes lit up, thrilled at the chance to finally showcase her strategist skills. That's it. Makoto put her arm around Kushina's shoulder, pulling her close. Her voice dropped, full of practical-sounding advice, though most of it was borrowed from girls' manga. Conventional tactics won't work on a man like Ryo. We need to cut the problem off at the root. There's only one principle. Non-stop, irresistible, high-intensity close contact. Get him used to your presence until his wooden brain can't think of anything else but Uzumaki Kushina. Makoto rattled off like she was giving battle orders. Step 1. Invade his personal space completely. Stick to him like glue. After class. Ask him about ninjutsu. Walking home. Link arms naturally. Training break. Sit right next to him, shoulder to shoulder. When you pass him water, accidentally, touch his hand. Remember, accidentally is the key. Make it look natural, leave him no excuse to refuse. Step 2. Magnify your expressions. Eyes. Use admiration, anger, or tears, make him unable to look away. Voice. Soften it. Draw it out. End on a rise. Ryo, help me, do you get the destructive power? Pout when necessary. Stomp your feet. Works like magic. Step 3. The ultimate weapon. Makoto's tone dropped lower, filled with resolve. Escalate physical contact. Hugs. Don't hesitate. Find excuses. Hug him when you win, hug him when you lose. Happy. Hug. Sad. Hug even more. If he's hurt, cry and rush into his arms. Use your warmth to break through his cold exterior. And then find your chance to kiss him. Cheek or corner of his mouth, doesn't matter. Kiss him, then run. Leave him standing there, exploding inside. Every word Makoto said detonated in Kushina's mind, making her dizzy, her cheeks hot enough to fry an egg. Hugging, she could just about imagine. But kissing. Kushina felt like her brain was overheating, steam rising from her head. Am I, Makoto? She stammered, staring at her best friend in disbelief. How do you even know all this? You're basically an old driver of love. She couldn't believe the usually composed Uchiha girl had such fierce and detailed strategies. That kind of knowledge had to come from a mountain of girls' comics, or a pile of actual experience. Makoto's smile froze. The air hung still for a few seconds. Ahem, Makoto coughed lightly, suddenly embarrassed. She turned away, her earlobes faintly red. How could she admit it? Should she say, actually, I once thought about going after Ryo, but his cold glare scared me off, and then you swooped in and stole the chance. Impossible. That shameful history would never be revealed. She tugged at her sleeves, speaking vaguely, of course I had to arm myself with theory. I was worried about my best friend's happiness. Enough nonsense. The battle starts now. Let's see how well you execute, Kushina. To be continued. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 32. Operation Elbow Hook Bonus. The warm afternoon sun, filtered through the leaves, lazily dappled the dirt roads of Konoha. Ryo had just stepped out of the stuffy air of the ninja tool shop, which reeked of saltpeter and metal, a heavy, slightly stiff sealed scroll now in his hand. The shop owner's old face, crisscrossed with wrinkles, still wore a smile, but the probing look in his eyes was as sharp as a needle, clearly piqued by the custom-made items Ryo had ordered. Explosive tags too weak to kill a ninja. Hey, kid, play with fire and you might burn yourself. The old man smacked his lips, his voice drifting into Ryo's ear, neither too loud nor too soft. Ryo merely pretended not to hear, casually tucking the scroll deep into his ninja tool pouch. Too weak. A precisely controlled burst was more than enough to break bones, especially the leg bone of a half-ground kid like Nawaki, who was not invulnerable. It was sufficient. He continued his stride, his destination clear, the Ninja Academy. After picking up Kushina, the next step was the planned accident. The old gate of the Ninja Academy, painted a cream yellow, was visible in the distance. The afternoon dismissal bell had just ceased, and the lingering scent of dust from frantic running still hung in the air of the playground. Ryo stood like a stone statue, leaning against the luxuriant phoenix tree beside the school gate, its shadow engulfing most of his figure. The iron gate of the Ninja Academy clanged open with a forceful push, and a tide of students surged out, their noise reaching a fever pitch. Amidst the surging crowd, that fiery red hair was still dazzling, like a vibrant banner. Uzumaki Kushina walked out of the school gate, close beside Uchiha Makoto, a trace of unspent heat still on her small face. Makoto was rapidly whispering something into Kushina's ear, her black hair brushing against her fair cheek, her eyes sparkling. As Kushina listened, the blush that had faded from her cheeks suddenly flared up again, more vivid than her red hair, her earlobes glowing like ripe fruit. She quickly glanced towards the school gate, and when she caught sight of the familiar figure under the phoenix tree, a flicker of imperceptible panic and desperate resolve crossed her eyes. Through the surging crowd, Ryo naturally saw them too. He frowned slightly. Kushina's expression was off. The usually fiery red pepper now had flickering eyes and hesitant steps. And beside her, Makoto, the usually composed and proper Uchiha young lady, had a curve to her lips that held a hint of playful teasing and encouragement, like a mastermind. A faint alarm bell rang in Ryo's mind. Sure enough, Makoto gave Kushina a push on her back, not hard, but with an undeniable urgency. Kushina stiffened for a moment, like a fighting cock suddenly thrown into the ring, then took a deep breath, as if that air injected immense courage into her. She abruptly quickened her pace, not bouncing over to tug at his sleeve as usual, but instead, with an extremely clear objective, almost braving the curious or knowing gazes of her classmates, she charged straight towards him. Then, under Ryo's slightly puzzled gaze, Kushina unhesitatingly reached out both hands and tightly linked them through his right arm, which hung at his side, as if grasping a lifesaver. The sunlight caught his sharply defined profile, reflecting the faint flicker of surprise in his eyes. Warmth spread from his right arm, soft, delicate, yet firm. The girl's body heat seeped through the thin fabric, carried with a nervous tremble, but her grip was tight, clinging like a vine wrapped stubbornly around a tree trunk. Ryo shifted slightly, intending to free himself, but the small hands clutching his arm were fastened like welded clasps, tightening the more he moved. That made him pause. She was acting strangely. Let go. Ryo's voice was low and steady, carrying a suppressed edge, his gaze fixed on the stubborn little swirl of hair on top of Kushina's head. His expression remained impassive, though his arm felt uncomfortably restrained. Kushina looked up abruptly like a startled rabbit, her eyes astonishingly bright, with a look of desperate resolve, glaring back without showing weakness. No. Her voice was a little sharp, and her confidence seemed to still be floating in the air, her gaze unconsciously darting to the side. Ryo followed her gaze. Not far away, amidst the bustling crowd, Uchiha Makoto stood with her arms crossed, waving a small fist towards them in a loving gesture, mouthing silently, "Go for it." So, someone really was giving advice. A barely perceptible vein twitched on Ryo's forehead. He tried to pull his arm away with more force, but the resistance was odd. Or perhaps, it was the unfamiliar, soft warmth that kept his strength in check, making his movements less decisive than usual. It was strange. Strange, yet not unpleasant. Let go. People are staring. No. Kushina bit her lower lip, her gaze wavering for a moment, then gathering into stubborn persistence. What is wrong with me holding your arm? Everyone does it. Her gaze darted around, sweeping over several pairs of students walking side by side or with linked arms. Ryo had no rebuttal. He caught sight of the curious stares around them, attention steadily gathering on the unusual pair. He didn't like being the focus of a crowd. The longer this dragged on, the worse it would become. So, under the prickling pressure of countless eyes, he took the initiative, his right foot stepping forward, calm and deliberate. He wasn't being dragged. He was moving first. Kushina clung to his arm like an ornament, her presence light yet burning. With every step, her grip drew out the warmth of her body, making the sensation harder to ignore. Kushina's heart pounded in her chest, almost exploding. Success. First step. Makoto's plan, breaking through the comfort zone, was working exactly as she said. Her face burned like fire, but she could not help trying to curve her lips up, which she forcefully suppressed. She could only bury her head lower, her gaze fixed on the backs of her feet, letting that irresistible blush spread from her neck all the way to her hairline, hotter than flames. The familiar path back to the Senju compound seemed exceptionally long today. Every bend, every uneven step, tested Ryo's composure. Her arm was like a warm shackle, restraining his usual indifference and replacing it with an unfamiliar, unsteady rhythm. He could clearly feel the pressure of her fingertips through the fabric, and the subtle, continuous throb of her heartbeat transmitted through the thin material. Finally, the ancient and heavy black lacquered gate of the Senju clan came into view, with no idlers at the entrance. As soon as that symbolic black lacquered gate entered his line of sight, Ryo, almost with a sigh of relief, suddenly yanked his arm free. Ah! Kushina was caught off guard, letting out a surprised cry, her arm losing strength and loosening its grip. The warmth that had been intimately connected was instantly severed. Ryo did not even glance at her, sidestepping into the open gate. Kushina lingered at the entrance, staring at her empty hand. Then, a sly little smile tugged at her lips. Effective. Absolutely effective. This strategy really worked. Taking 2 deep breaths, she also quickly stepped through the gate. This was Grandma Mito's house. She would not dare to act as wildly as she did outside. In the spacious courtyard, a tranquility more oppressive than the afternoon sun permeated the air. Nawaki leaned against a corridor pillar, his eyes somewhat glazed as he watched the two enter one after another, their atmosphere inexplicably strange. Ryo was a rare sight here, or rather, it was rare for him to actively step inside the threshold, and Kushina's flushed little face exuded an unspeakable excitement. Nawaki unconsciously scratched his unruly black hair, confused. Ryo, how did you come in? Ryo did not stop, walking straight toward the direction from which the smell of food wafted, his voice steady, betraying no emotion. Tsunade called me. Concise and to the point, it stifled Nawaki's belly full of curiosity. To be continued. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 33. Nawaki's Battle Bonus. Uploaded all bonuses. Thank you for your support last week. Let's aim even higher this week. Also, the bonus is still at 100 PS, so take advantage while it lasts. Have a nice read. Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond, Hollow Diamond. In the evening, the air in the Senju clan's main residence was as heavy as stagnant water. Ryo's gaze swept over the frail old woman in the main seat. Uzumaki Mito's aging was shocking. In just 2 years, her crimson hair had withered like autumn grass, and her wrinkles were as deep as knife cuts. Years of battling the corrosive power of the 9 tails had continuously depleted Mito's vitality. Even the Uzumaki clan's longevity, and the yin seal that promised youthful looks, could not hold out. Ryo's gaze shifted to Tsunade by the dining table, and he gave a barely perceptible nod. Just a moment ago, he had found a chance to tell Tsunade his plan, to shatter Nawaki's blind battlefield fantasies with a seemingly perilous real combat exercise. Tsunade knitted her brows as she took the special explosive tags, her fingertips glowing faintly with chakra. Fine chakra threads probed into the paper, precisely inspecting it. After a moment, she looked up to meet Ryo's calm gaze and let out an almost inaudible, "Hm." The chakra explosion range was limited to the epidermis, and the impact was concentrated and directed. It would only injure, not cripple. She pushed the tags back into Ryo's hand, tapping the corner 3 times with her thumb. Plan approved. Uzumaki Mito's hand, holding her teacup, paused. Her peripheral vision caught her granddaughter's tensed jawline, then fell upon the tags Ryo had put away. A flicker of understanding passed through the old woman's cloudy eyes, and her leaf-like lips pressed into a flat line. That was the silent acquiescence of the Senju clan head. The steam and aroma of oil and salt drifting from the kitchen barely stirred the air, yet they brought a deeper, sticky sensation. Ryo watched Nawaki across the table devour the last mouthfuls of rice like a whirlwind. A strange heaviness settled in his own stomach. Nawaki's chopsticks clinked against the bowl, his eyes sparkling with a fiery intensity, full of youthful ambition and battle lust, burning with desire and imagination for the battlefield. Ryo knew that light well. It belonged to a newborn calf, untested by wind and rain, unaware of how flesh and blood are ground into mud. Clear, yet foolish. He could almost smell the blind excitement radiating from Nawaki. The fastest to die on the battlefield were these hotheads. Sis, this time, following Orochimaru-sensei. During the mission, Nawaki put down his bowl, his voice rising sharply. I personally took down a. Got it, Tsunade cut him off coolly, picking up the last piece of pickled radish with her chopsticks and biting into it with a crisp snap that ended Nawaki's animated speech. Nawaki was like a duck with its neck squeezed, his words stuck in his throat. His excitement deflated, and an awkward blush spread across his face. Ryo silently put down his bowl. Under the table, Tsunade's foot accurately tapped his ankle, not too hard, not too soft, urging him on. The show was about to begin. He looked up at Tsunade. Tsunade's eyelids were lowered, her long eyelashes casting a small shadow on her cheek. Deep within that shadow lay undeniable resolve. Uzumaki Mito softly, Ed, a whisper as faint as wind rustling withered leaves, yet it carried the heavy weight of silent consent. The dining table was cleared, but the atmosphere tightened even more, like a taut bowstring. Nawaki, Tsunade lifted her eyes, her gaze heavy, pressing down on her younger brother. Do you really want to go to the battlefield? Of course. Nawaki straightened his back as if injected with a stimulant, the extinguished flame in his eyes flaring again. I am the heir of the Senju. I want to become a great Hokage like Grandpa. How can I hide in the village? Mito's fingers, holding the teacup, tightened slightly, her knuckles turning pale. Ryo caught the fleeting hint of pain in the old woman's eyes. Tsunade's face did not soften. Whether you are a Senju or the Hokage's grandson, each word fell like ice on stone, speak with strength. Shouting slogans and running to the battlefield is suicide. Nawaki's face turned beet red, a vein throbbing in his forehead. Sis. I'm not an academy rookie anymore. I have followed Orochimaru-sensei for over a year. He was eager to prove himself, but when he met Tsunade's icy gaze, his momentum faltered at the end. Proof. Tsunade snorted. Good. I will give you a chance. Beat him. She jerked her chin at Ryo. If you beat Ryo, forget the battlefield. I will go talk to the Hokage for you and have you put in charge of important missions. If you cannot beat him, drop the idea early. Nawaki's gaze snapped to Ryo's face, shock, anger, fear, and disbelief mixing, then hardening into humiliation at being underestimated. His eyes burned red. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. Kushina even jumped up, her small face pale. Tsunaden-ichan. No, this will not do. Ryo, he. She wanted to say Ryo was too strong and did not hold back, so how could Nawaki fight him? But seeing Tsunade's iron-cold expression, she swallowed the rest. Sis, you know, Nawaki's voice trembled with fear of Ryo. Tsunade cut him off. Are you fighting or not? One word. She crossed her arms. Her aura locked down the space, the air turning to lead. Nawaki's chest heaved, his teeth grinding audibly. His gaze swept over Mito's expressionless face. The silent worry in his grandmother's eyes pricked him like a needle. His pride surged like boiling lava. He stomped his foot, the wooden floor groaning. If I have to fight, I will fight. What is there to be afraid of? He strode toward the center of the backyard's open space, each step causing a slight tremor, filled with desperate resolve. The wind ruffled his bangs, his back burning with anger and a make-or-break courage. Ryo. Kushina urgently grabbed Ryo's arm, her lowered voice laced with panic and pleading. You must go easy on him. Her moist eyes reflected Ryo's expressionless face, her small face full of entreaty. Ryo's gaze lingered on her for a moment, calm. Relax. I will not use sword techniques, or taijutsu. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Nawaki, who stood tense like a bull in the center. Today, I will only use the Academy 3, and 1 Ninjutsu. Kushina opened her mouth, but her words stuck. Her worry did not lessen. It spread like cold vines through her chest. Ryo did not look at her again, walking directly to face Nawaki. Only the Academy 3 and a new ninjutsu. Nawaki sounded as if he had heard a joke. His twisted smile showed contempt and irritation. Are you looking down on me, Ryo? Ryo's answer was a flurry of hand signs, his hands moving like a butterfly dance, completed in an instant. Ninpo. Bunshin no Jutsu. Bang bang bang. White smoke burst out, and several Ryo figures appeared at once, scattered irregularly, vaguely surrounding Nawaki. The movements were so fast that only afterimages remained on Nawaki's retina. Nawaki's pupils contracted. The speed of this Bunshin no Jutsu was astonishing, but his reaction was also quick. HMPH. Sweeten, Mizoripa water release, wild water wave. His hand signs were equally swift. Water roared from his mouth, crashing into the clones in front. Puff puff puff. The clones disintegrated under the impact, turning into white smoke. However, just as the wild water wave's power was about to dissipate, Nawaki's peripheral vision caught something, a gust of wind from the smoke on the left. One Ryo, using the brief cover of water mist and smoke, lunged forward. His right palm extended, and above its center, a rapidly spinning, compressed ball of chakra churned the air, emitting a low, piercing hum like venomous bees circling at low altitude. It tore through the calm air. What is that? Nawaki's scalp prickled. Training instincts kicked in. He twisted his body to the right with incredible flexibility. The Rasengan, with its ear-tearing roar, whizzed past the space under his ribs. The heat from its terrifying rotation scorched his skin. Nawaki broke into a cold sweat, no longer daring to show contempt. Even without sword techniques or taijutsu, the pressure from this new ninjutsu was terrifying. He quickly retreated to create distance, then formed another water release hand sign. Sweeten, Sujinheki, water formation wall. Splash. A thick wall of water rose from the ground, instantly separating him and Ryo. The water curtain shimmered, reflecting Ryo's calm face, and distorting the lingering shock in his own eyes. But Ryo gave Nawaki no chance to breathe. Only scattered white smoke remained where he had stood. His true body had already used Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement technique, to move to Nawaki's side and rear. Here. Nawaki growled, his combat instincts sensing the direction, and he formed hand signs again. Sweeten, Sushoha, water shockwave wave. Denser streams of water, like a bursting dam, rushed toward Ryo, who had just revealed himself. But Ryo seemed to have predicted it. A fraction of a second before the water shockwave fully formed, he crouched and pushed off, moving like a swallow skimming the ground, narrowly dodging the surging water. Splashing droplets grazed his hair and the edges of his clothes. Nawaki's heart sank. Ryo's speed and foresight were terrifying. His Sweeten was powerful enough to defeat ordinary Chunin, but if it could not hit, it was wasted effort. He changed strategy, trying to suppress Ryo with continuous wild water waves. Ha! Ha! With each shout, streams of water crisscrossed, splashing mud and water, filling the air with a damp chill. Yet Ryo's figure always slipped through the gaps with despairing agility. Damn it! Impatience grew in Nawaki's heart like vines choking reason. Then do not blame me. Suiten, Suiryuden no Jutsu, Water Dragon Bullet Technique. Nawaki abandoned all reservations. His chakra surged at full power, and his hand signs turned complex and solemn. Heavy water vapor rapidly condensed, and a huge dragon-shaped mass of water twisted into form. Its scales and claws still held the blur of a novice's jutsu, but its power far exceeded ordinary Suiten. Kushina cried out in alarm. Nawaki. To be continued. Chapter 34. Death by Explosion. A giant dragon roared, carrying an irresistibly powerful current, and slammed into Ryo in the center of the arena. The entire backyard seemed to be enveloped by its massive shadow. Ryo faced the rushing Suiryuden no Jutsu with an impassive face. His body sank slightly, his center of gravity pressed low. The muscles of his right arm bulged, and the blue Rasengan in his palm suddenly hummed at high speed, its brightness surging. The terrifying rotational force of the condensed chakra stirred the air, forming a small vortex centered on the Rasengan. Facing the crashing dragon head, he showed no intention of dodging. A head-on clash. No. Just as the dragon head, carrying immense power, was about to engulf him, Ryo twisted his body sideways like a ghost. He did not charge head-on into the energy core of the jutsu. His right palm, wrapped in the fiercely spinning Rasengan, moved like a precise mechanical arm, tracing an ingenious trajectory. It was precise and ruthless, yet contained a yielding roundness, pressing against a weak chakra node slightly behind the right side of the dragon's head, 3 inches below the neck. This was not brute force. It was like a butcher dismembering an ox. Buzz. Sizzle. The high-speed rotational cutting of the Rasengan took effect instantly. The dragon's head was torn apart like it had been fed into an invisible blade wheel. Its structure collapsed in an instant. The violent chakra flow was twisted and ripped apart. Boom. The subsequent mass of water lost control. Without the dragon head's guidance, it swept everywhere like a bursting mountain flood. Droplets turned into a downpour, pounding roofs and walls with incessant rattling. The courtyard ground, once only patchy with wet, became a muddy puddle. The enormous backlash made Nawaki's chest churn, and he stumbled back several steps before he stabilized. He stared, stunned, at the shattered water dragon turning into a sky full of spray. This overturned his understanding. His strongest attack, the Brank Suiryuden no Jutsu, had been dispersed by a ninjutsu he had never heard of. What was that? Nawaki asked, his voice lost. Rasengan. Ryo uttered 3 words. He stood by the muddy puddle, splashed with water, his breathing steady. Looking at Nawaki's bewildered, flustered face, Ryo felt no smugness. The timing was perfect. Ryo formed hand signs again. Bunshin no Jutsu. White smoke spread, and several clones reappeared, like a trained pack of wolves, launching feints from different directions. After the mental shock of his failed dragon, Nawaki's reactions had dulled. Several clones surged forward. Nawaki's nerves stretched taut. He hastily formed hand signs. Suiten, Suj, the Sujinheki water formation wall, had only risen halfway when his movement suddenly paused. A Ryo clone on the left, rushing closer, suddenly slipped, staggering on the muddy ground as if losing footing, exposing a clear gap in its chest and abdomen. This sliver of a flaw was like a desert spring in Nawaki's overworked mind. Accumulated anger and unwillingness, humiliation suppressed to madness, instantly became fuel driven by instinct. Opportunity. A sharp glint flashed in Nawaki's eyes. The last shred of rationality was overwhelmed. He ignored Suiten defense and tactics, roaring, "Break him." He drove off the muddy ground and charged at the Ryo that had exposed a weakness. All his chakra condensed into his fist. He aimed to slam it into the center of that staggering clone's chest, to blast this annoying Ryo apart himself. Die. Nawaki's roar carried the sudden release of ecstasy and relief. Bang. The unadorned fist struck true. That Ryo exploded into a cloud of white smoke. A clone. The impact twisted Nawaki's ferocity into a grim, triumphant smile, as if he had avenged a great enemy. However, as the white smoke burst and the clone dispersed, an ominous orangered light, like a demon's eye, pierced from the core of the dissipating smoke. Then, boom. Orangered flames and precisely controlled shockwaves, like a chained beast, tore through smoke and dust, violent yet restrained. At the moment Nawaki's fist touched the clone, his weight was pitched forward, his defense at its weakest, and that triumphant face, inches from the blast point, had not even finished its smile. This was not a clone being destroyed. It was a trap, preloaded with special explosive tags and detonated on cue. Nawaki's triumph froze into horror before it could turn to shock. He had no time to pull back, form hand signs, or gather protective chakra. The distance was too close, the explosion too violent. The instant he saw the flare, the shockwave had already hit. It's over. Ah! Nawaki's scream began, then was swallowed by the roar. He flew several meters like a rag doll, then crashed into the muddy pit. Plop! Blood spread through the mud, glaring and red. Nawaki's legs were torn and twisted, stark white bone fragments showing. His eyes rolled back and he passed out, the grim triumph still stuck on his face. Nawaki. Kushina's heart-wrenching scream pierced the fading echoes. The smoke had not fully dissipated when Tsunade shot forward. She moved so fast only an afterimage remained. Plop! She knelt in the mud, splashing murky water. Her hands moved like lightning. A dense, tangible green chakra gathered in her palms. Nawaki. Tsunade's roar was urgent, but her hands were iron steady as she pressed the Shozen Jutsu mystical palm technique onto the bloody, profusely bleeding fracture. Sizzle. The sharp, powerful stimulation of the mystical palm technique plunged into Nawaki's body. Nawaki's body jolted as if electrocuted. A broken whimper squeezed from his throat, then he went limp. Uzumaki Mito walked over silently, her hunched back straightening. Her cloudy eyes swept over the black-red puddle, over Nawaki's mangled legs, and finally rested on Ryo. That gaze was bottomless, heavy as lead. She did not speak. She extended a withered hand to press firmly on Nawaki's uninjured forearm, as if to hold something steady. Ryo could feel a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand. Ryo stood still, the blast's dust shaking from his clothes. His face was expressionless, calm as if he had brushed off some dirt. His eyes met Tsunade's glance. Tsunade's eyes were like hot iron, filled with rage, icy reproach, and something too complex to untangle, locking onto Ryo. Ryo! She roared, her voice scraping bone. The meaning was clear. Explain yourself. Ryo sneered inwardly. Keep acting. I will carry the blame. He lowered his eyelids, avoiding her murderous stare, but his gaze, unfortunately, fell on the frozen figure beside him. Kushina looked struck by lightning, rooted to the spot. A few strands of hair were disheveled by the blast. The color drained from her face. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. Her light blue eyes were full of shock, panic, and fear on the verge of breaking. Most of that fear was not directed at Nawaki. Her gaze darted between Ryo, Tsunade, and Mito. Mito was too calm. So calm it made her uneasy. Tsunade's fury looked like it would tear Ryo apart on the spot. It is over. Kushina's mind roared. Grandma would drive Ryo away and never let her see him again. That thought gripped her heart like a demon's claw, suffocating her. Tears welled up, filming her terrified eyes with desperate moisture. Uzumaki Mito let out a long breath, as if setting down a burden. She patted Nawaki's uninjured arm, then straightened. Her cloudy gaze swept the scene, landed on Kushina's distraught face, then turned to Ryo. Tsunade. Mito's voice was steady and carried undeniable weight. Take Nawaki to the hospital and treat him carefully. Ryo, you stay. Grandma. Kushina, like a cat with its tail stepped on, pounced toward Mito, her voice trembling with a sob. Nawaki, he. Mito's withered yet strong hand caught Kushina's clenched fist, pulling her close. Her other hand supported Kushina's weak shoulders, sheltering her under her wing. Understood, Grandma. Tsunade growled low, deftly lifting the unconscious Nawaki and shielding his vital points. Before leaving, she glared fiercely at Ryo, eyes like they could eat him. There was acting in that, and real anger at her brother's state. Holding Nawaki, she rushed out through the courtyard gate like the wind and vanished. To be continued. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 35. Kushina Short Circuits Bonus. The messy scene in the backyard was mostly cleared in an instant. The lingering smell of blood mixed with mud stung their noses, leaving only silent wreckage and a few people standing in a daze. Kushina bit her lip hard, almost tasting iron. Her whole body still trembled slightly, half from fright, half from immense confusion and fear. Her grandmother's presence beside her was like a giant iceberg, exuding a chilling coldness. She did not dare to look up, only felt Mito's grip on her hand tighten. That hand was rough and warm, carrying a strange, heavy strength. Mito did not speak immediately. She pulled Kushina forward 2 steps, her gaze sweeping over the muddy pit where Nawaki had fallen. The congealed black and red bloodstains were particularly jarring. Mixed in were a few blown charred scraps of fabric. The old woman's gaze paused for a moment, extremely brief, so brief it could have been an illusion. Then she turned to Kushina, her tone calm and seasoned, yet carrying an unmistakable conclusion. Kushina, in real combat drills, there will always be injuries. Kushina looked up sharply, eyes wide with disbelief. Grandma is. Mito seemed oblivious to her shock, continuing in a steady, unhurried voice. This time, it is not Ryo's fault. This sentence blocked all of Kushina's attempts to plead for Ryo. Your brother Nawaki has been graduated for over a year now. He could not see such an obvious trap. Mito's voice even carried a hint of sternness, disappointment at his failure. He deserves to be injured. Deserves. The words lashed at Kushina's heart like a whip. Were those words spoken by the grandma who doted on Nawaki? Nawaki was lying in a pool of blood, bone showing. Tears gushed out, blurring her vision. But, Grandma. No buts. Mito cut her off decisively, tightening her grip on Kushina's hand a little more. Her eyes, which had seen through the ways of the world, fixed on her granddaughter's tear-filled gaze. With your sister Tsunade here, Nawaki will be fine. Her medical ninjutsu can pull back someone with half a life left, let alone a serious flesh and bone injury. What are you worrying about? Kushina was stunned by this barrage of conclusions, tears clinging to her lashes as she stared blankly at her grandmother. Her calm, almost cruel tone, the unquestionable attitude, was like a basin of ice water, freezing her burning anger and worry for Ryo. Logically, it seemed to make sense. Nawaki did rush into the trap himself, and Ryo did not use sword or taijutsu, only clones, the Academy 3, and that new jutsu. But he still used explosive tags. She suddenly turned her head, her gaze piercing the lingering smoke, glaring at Ryo with a mix of grievance and resentment. Why was he so ruthless? What if Mito really was not reasonable? What if she got angry and wanted Ryo's life? These fears almost tore her apart. She clasped her fingers tightly, not even noticing her nails digging into her palms. Ryo sneered inwardly, wanting to throw the truth in her face. Silly girl. Your grandma and your sister conspired with me to do this. All to break the leg of that reckless Nawaki who is eager to rush to the battlefield and die. To make him lie quietly in a hospital bed for a few months. To keep him from ending up a corpse on the battlefield next time. That truth was too cruel, and too absurd. Ryo forced down the impulse. With Kushina's quick temper and inability to keep secrets, she would shout it at the barely conscious Nawaki in Konoha Hospital within half a day. If Nawaki learned from her that this bloody lesson was orchestrated by his sister and grandmother, Ryo did not want to imagine the outcome. Nawaki would probably collapse and question his life. Was he really their own? What a huge irony. While Kushina was left speechless by Mito's conclusion, Ryo took a step forward, breaking the eerie silence. He looked at Mito, his posture neither humble nor arrogant, with a hint of a junior's respect. Mito-sama, I am very sorry about Nawaki. Although it was necessary for the drill, he was indeed injured. Mito nodded slightly, her face unreadable. As long as you know the limits. Ruthless, but leaving room. Tsunade can heal Nawaki, let him lie down for a few months, cool his head, and keep him from running to the battlefield and not coming back. Mito spoke directly, without any attempt to conceal her meaning. Ryo understood and got straight to the point. That is Nawaki. I want to bring up another matter. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the still dazed Kushina. There is still some time until graduation. The battlefield situation is getting worse by the day. Kushina, he left it there. He saw Mito's eyelid twitch slightly. My meaning is, during this period before graduation, I want to arrange special training for Kushina. Ryo stated his purpose. Mainly practical combat response and the mastery of a special ninjutsu. He did not mention the name, but his gaze drifted to Kushina's face. Her eyes had gone wide when she saw him dismantle Nawaki's Suiryuden with the Rasengan. Mito scrutinized Ryo. Tsunade had already informed her of the boy's true strength. Elite Jonin, without a doubt. Hiruzen might not know Ryo's capabilities, but she did. Entrusting Kushina to him for a time, to push her strength before war broke out, was a worthwhile deal. Kushina, who carried the remaining hope of Uzushiogakure, had, in these 2 years, come to see Konoha as home. Mito saw it clearly. Kushina's sense of belonging no longer needed proof from sitting in a classroom. Besides, there was a better bond. This girl had tied her heart to Ryo. She should give them space and let their relationship progress. Strength, Mito finally said, steady as ever, is crucial. It is always good for Konoha to have more power. She looked at Ryo, a flicker of approval in her cloudy eyes. I will leave Kushina with you for a few months. Arrange it as you see fit. I will not interfere. The last 4 words were both trust and acknowledgement. Beside him, Kushina felt dazed, her ears buzzing ever since Ryo mentioned special training for her. What battlefield? What special training? What were Grandma and Ryo talking about? Her sluggish mind turned like old gears. Just now, she was fearing her brother's injury and Ryo's reckoning. How did it jump to her getting individual special training with Ryo? Not only did Grandma not blame him for injuring Nawaki, she agreed to let him train her. When Mito's words, I will leave Kushina with you for a few months, reached her, what exploded was not thunder, but a scorching current rushing to her head. Her previously pale face turned red like a cooked shrimp. Ryo, alone, guidance. Whoosh. Makoto's, Ryo emotional progression, strategies flashed before her eyes, creating physical contact, hugs, even kisses. Boom. Kushina felt her scalp steam. Her whole body went dizzy, as if she were soaking in a honey-hot spring, her feet floating. Ryo's peripheral vision caught her rapidly rising blush, and he clicked his tongue inwardly. I understand, Mito-sama. Ryo bowed slightly. I will arrange time and place. I will not delay Kushina's basic Fuinjutsu studies with you. As for the academy, HMPH, a few months of practical experience is worth years of wasted time there. If she graduates early, so be it. I will talk to Sarutobi. Mito's tone was flat, but her words carried the assertiveness of Konoha's ruler. Thank you. Ryo's goal achieved, the curve of his mouth flattened. His gaze turned to Kushina, who was still in a steam engine state. The instant their eyes met, she dropped her gaze as if scalded, fingers nervously twisting the hem of her clothes. Color rushed from her neck to the tips of her ears, and even her unruly red cowlick seemed to droop in embarrassment. Then I will not disturb you further today. Ryo took his leave. This was not the place to linger. He had taken the blame and achieved his goal. Time to go. I will make time to visit Nawaki. Mito waved her hand. A hint of fatigue flashed in her eyes, tacit consent given. Ryo turned and left, his steps swift and decisive, quickly crossing the messy courtyard and disappearing under the porch at the gate. The moment he left, the taut string in the backyard seemed to loosen a little. Mito turned her head, her gaze falling on her little granddaughter, who had not yet emerged from her tangle of emotions. Kushina was still immersed in the idea of being, specially trained, by Ryo, her face red, wearing the dazed look of someone who had survived a calamity, mixed with a shy anticipation she could not put into words. To be continued. Chapter 36. Training Arc Bonus. The newborn sun had just torn through the cicada-wing thin mist above Konoha, casting a cool light upon the path that had just witnessed a silent farewell. In the air, it seemed as if last night's cool dew and a certain oppressive heaviness still lingered. Ryo stood at the edge of the hidden forest behind the Senju old residence, his shadow stretched long. The morning's silence was widened by a few intermittent bird calls in the distance, yet it could not drown out the echo of that brief scene from a few hours ago in his mind. Tsunade had efficiently dealt with the last bit of trouble from Nawaki's broken leg, her movements crisp and clean as always. She did not even wait for the anesthetic to wear off before slinging that familiar giant scroll onto her back. The assembled team at the village gate had already departed. There was no grand send-off, only an urgent and somber departure. Hey! Just before Tsunade was about to join Orochimaru and Jiraiya's team, Ryo's voice rang out, neither a plea to stay nor softened by any extra address. Tsunade's steps paused. Do not die. Kushina, standing nearby, bit her lower lip, her light blue eyes filled with unconcealed worry, her gaze glued to Tsunade's straight back. Tsunade did not look back. She just waved her hand forcefully and casually, her back to them. That figure, representing Konoha's princess, the battlefield's miracle healer, and the last glory of the Senju, finally stopped lingering and strode forward to join Orochimaru and Jiraiya, embarking on the dusty road toward Aim. Her silhouette gradually shrank and blurred amidst the thin mist and trees. Until the last bit of her outline disappeared, like a distant mountain swallowed by thick fog. The next sun rose over Konoha, its rays slipping through the lingering morning haze and casting a cool light. Ryo stood at the edge of the hidden forest behind the Senju old residence, his shadow stretched long. The morning air carried the crisp scent of damp earth and grassy dew, so quiet that only a few intermittent bird calls could be heard. His gaze swept over the somewhat disheveled training ground, still smelling of freshly turned earth, the place where Nawaki had received an unforgettable lesson yesterday. Ryo frowned. The thought was fleeting. Nawaki's leg was now resting under Tsunade's healing jutsu at Konoha Hospital, a decent outcome for everyone. Just then, hurried and slightly stumbling footsteps came from behind, carrying an undisguised dominance that broke the morning's tranquility. Ryo! A crisp shout pierced the thin forest mist, like a small cannonball flying at him. Ryo instinctively turned. Kushina ran toward him like a ball of fire leaping and burning in the morning light. Mito's decision yesterday, Kushina is entrusted to you for a few months, had ignited everything inside the little firecracker. She was almost the first to rush to the training ground, treading on the dew. Her dazzling red hair was casually gathered into a vibrant ponytail, swinging with her strides. Tiny beads of sweat dotted her temples. She was not wearing the neat academy uniform, probably finding it cumbersome. Instead, she wore a slightly faded but thick dark green short-sleeved training top, paired with form-fitting black capri training pants, revealing a section of energetic, smoothly contoured calves. On her feet were simple canvas gaiter boots, their soles stained with damp earth. Ryo's gaze swept over her battle-ready attire without much ripple. Too late. Kushina had just reached 2 meters in front of him. Before she could catch her breath, she was choked by those ice-cold words. The excited flush on her face seemed to deepen, probably from anger. She quickly took a deep breath, suppressing that spark of anger. Looking up, her voice was clear and self-righteous. I was too excited last night. Could not sleep. Is that not allowed? She boldly took a step closer, instantly shortening the distance, almost close enough to feel the warm, girlish scent from her. The sudden closeness did not shake Ryo in the slightest, but his gaze inadvertently swept over her chest, which rose and fell rapidly from running. Even the thick fabric could not completely conceal the soft curve. Talk nonsense again, and go back to the academy to sleep. His voice was clipped, carrying a trace of warning. Kushina immediately plastered on a big, somewhat stiff smile, even showing 2 rows of small white teeth. Her voice jumped 8 octaves and dragged out. No. Ryo. Say. What awesome thing are we learning today? Her deliberate fawning was like a small animal wagging its tail. The 2 words, sensei, drilled into his ears, but Ryo's face didn't pay it any mind. He gave her no extra glance, only turned and strode toward the flattest open space at the center of the field. Keep up. 2 words tossed over his shoulder. Kushina looked at his back and pouted hard, silently making a face. TCH. Dead wood. The complaints in her mind crackled like firecrackers, but her steps did not slow. She followed closely, her ponytail swinging in reluctant arcs behind her. To be continued.